So thank you. And it's a real pleasure to be here and a privilege with all the patients and parents and all the eminent scientists. Some of them I've had the privilege to work with. I'm not talking about myself. So, as mentioned, what for someone with APS1, it's important to be able to predict the disease. And as Dr. Leonakis pointed out, with the autoantibodies, sometimes you can do it and sometimes not. But with 21-hydroxylase, they are quite robust. So these are the kind of antibodies you get when you vaccinate for COVID, but these ones are against your own tissue. And I think the 21-hydroxylase antibodies is perhaps the only significant finding I have ever done. And it's, it's a bit depressing. It's more than 30 years ago. But it's still underused. So the antibodies bind to the entire cortex where aldosterone, cortisol, etc. are made. And when this is destroyed, you get the typical symptoms. So this is a patient of mine who has vitiligo, as you can see, but he's also very hyperpigmented. And the hyperpigmentation, that is because, where the adrenals is, the thyroid, the ovaries, pituitary, almost all these organs can be affected with APS1. But what happens is if you don't have destroyed your adrenal cortex, you get an increase of the pituitary hormone ACTH that tries to put the adrenal on. And when it's not succeeding, it becomes higher and higher and higher. And eventually it will affect the skin pigmentation because it resembles the melanocyte stimulating hormones. So symptoms, we've heard about the symptoms in the adrenal. You can see the blue aldosterone, that's the mineral corticoid that affects the salt balance, and the cortisol, which is the glucocorticoid, affects weight, appetite, etc. And then you have the androgens. And as pointed out, we usually only replace aldosterone and cortisol. And so you give the hydrocortisone, and I would not suggest you use prednisolone, and definitely not dexamethasone, which is more or less like a poison if you have Addison's disease. Fludrocortisone, what happens if you give too much of it? You swell up. So you always actually get too little. And what happens then? Then in your urine, you constantly lose sodium. So you have to replace that with normal salt. And that's something that all vets have known for decades, but it's not so well known among physicians, I'm afraid. So you always salt your food so it tastes well. Not too much, but not too little. This is medical alert card that we introduced in Sweden because we noticed that there were different cards for different hospitals and they were sometimes contradictory. So we were able to get all Swedish endocrinologists to have one card that will easily be recognized. And we also have a very short text to tell the physician what they should do, because we had patients who only got half the treatment or no treatment, or sometimes in the emergency were stopped by the nurse because they were young and looked healthy. And these were This card was later added by the European Society of Endocrinology. But of course they had to change the font, you know, to make it a bit fancy. So there is a card for adult and one for... So in Sweden we have Swedish on one side and English on the other side. And now in Europe we have it in most countries. And I don't know if it's spread over the Atlantic yet.
We have it in Canada, thanks to you. This is your second most important contribution.
Yeah, I know it has saved lives.
Real quick, I forgot to bring them with me, but I have a box of these cards at home. So if you email the foundation with your address, Spanish version and English French version. Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, so what about the acute treatment? And then this is the important message. If you have even a mild stomach upset, that's your Achilles heel. All other instances, you're like most of us actually. But even mild can cause an adrenal crisis, and that's because you have too rapid movement in the intestine, and cortisol is not taken up in the colon. So even though you're not vomiting, you may not get your cortisol when you need it the most. When you lose fluid and you lose your electrolytes. So our recommendations, and I'm happy to hear from my fellow clinicians what they say, but we tell our patients to go to hospital within 12 hours, if not resolved, and bring the card so they don't send you home. And in Sweden, typically they say, oh, you have a stomach upset, take some blueberry soup. That's the home remedy in Sweden. Then, on the other hand, don't be too afraid to have some fever. Double the dose, and you may stay at home if you otherwise feel good. So stomach upset is the problem. And the treatment, it's very simple and it's on the card. You should give 100 milligram of hydrocortisone in the form of Solcortef, rapidly intravenous. And why rapidly? And the reason is that we don't have any intravenous fludrocortisone. So if you give the hydrocortisone rapidly, then you saturate an enzyme called alpha-beta hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase type 2. And then cortisol will have mineralocorticoid effects. So not in an infusion. On the other hand, physiological saline should be given in an infusion. And both treatments are equally important. That's why you should go to a hospital and not stay at home. And then my last slide. We recently also made a similar medical alert card for parathyroidism because there are so many doctors who do not know how to treat it.
Exactly.
Thanks.